My daughter said her mother-in-law was a better mom than me and told me that she chose her to be the primary grandmother. Now she lives with it. I raised Tamara alone. Her father left when she was 2 and never sent a dime. I worked 2 jobs for 14 years. Phlebotomist during the day, cleaning office buildings at night. 5 hours of sleep most of her childhood. I made sure she had clean clothes, hot meals, and a bed that was hers. I drove a car with no air conditioning for 6 years because every extra dollar went into her college fund. When she got into nursing school, I cried in the parking lot because I had spent 11 years saving for that moment. I paid her tuition until she got a scholarship. Tamara married a man named Reggie when she was 26. His mother was Cheryl. Retired, 4-bedroom house her late husband paid off. Time and money I never had. She hosted dinners every Sunday. Redecorated the apartment as a wedding gift. Took Tamara to get her nails done every 2 weeks. I bought Tamara a $20 gift card for her birthday that year. That's what I could afford. The first comparison was at Thanksgiving. I made the food at my apartment. Collard greens, mac and cheese, cornbread, a turkey I brined overnight. Tamara took 1 bite and said Cheryl uses 3 kinds of cheese in hers. I didn't say anything. I made that mac and cheese with what I had on my counter. The second time was at Christmas. I gave her a scarf I knitted myself. It took 2 weeks. She held it up and said, "Oh, this is cute." Then opened Cheryl's cashmere sweater and put it on for the rest of the day. My scarf stayed in the bag on the floor by the door. She forgot it when she left. The third was the baby shower. Cheryl hosted it at her house with caterers and a photographer. I offered to help set up and she said everything was already handled. I brought baby clothes from the consignment shop. Clean, barely worn. Cheryl gave Tamara a stroller that cost more than my rent. Tamara hugged her for a long time and said, "You always know exactly what I need." I watched my daughter hug her like she had never been held before. I held that girl every single night for the first 3 years of her life when she couldn't sleep without me. The 4th time was the last. Tamara had the baby, a boy. I came to the hospital. Cheryl was already there. She had been in the delivery room. I was not invited. When I walked in, Cheryl was sitting beside the bed with her hand on Tamara's arm like she belonged there more than I did. I sat on the other side. Tamara smiled at Cheryl and said, "I hope I'm half the mom you are." I was sitting right there. I didn't react. I stayed an hour and drove home. 2 days later, I went back to visit. Reggie went to get food and Tamara and I were alone with the baby. I was holding him. She said she wanted to talk. She said she wanted Cheryl to be the primary grandmother. Cheryl had more room, more time, more resources. Cheryl had already offered to babysit full-time when Tamara went back to work. I asked if this was about money. She said it wasn't. Then she said, "Mom, I love you, but Cheryl is just a better mom than you were." I put him down gently in the bassinet. I picked up my purse. I told her I loved her. I went home. I didn't call the next day or the day after. I waited for her to call me. She didn't. Not for 3 weeks. When she finally called, it was because Cheryl had gone on a cruise and she needed someone to watch the baby on Monday. I let the phone buzz for a full minute before I answered. She came on like she was calling to ask me to grab milk. "Hey Mom, Cheryl's out of town for 10 days. Can you watch Arno?" No apology. No reference to the hospital. Just, "Hey Mom, I need something." I kept my voice flat. I said, "Tamara, you told me 3 weeks ago that Cheryl was a better mom than me. Why are you calling me?" The line went quiet. Not thinking quiet. The kind where the air got sucked out of the phone. I let her sit in it. Then she came back with the voice she uses when she wants to skip past something hard. She said, "Don't make this a whole thing. I just need help with the baby." I said, "I'm not making it a thing. You made it a thing when you said what you said." She said, "I didn't mean it like that and you know it." I said, "Then how did you mean it?" She sighed and said, "I just meant Cheryl has more stuff, more space, that's all." I said, "You said she was a better mom. That's not about stuff, Tamara." Silence. Then I heard Arnold fussing in the background, that soft hiccup cry that turns into a wail if nobody picks them up. Every part of me wanted to say yes, bring him to me. The word yes was sitting on my tongue. Then I saw it again. The hospital chair, my scarf in the bag, Cheryl's hand on Tamara's arm. I swallowed the yes, but I didn't say no because that baby didn't do anything wrong. I said, "I will watch Arno, but I am not your backup plan. If I do this, we are going to sit down and have a real conversation about what you said to me, and you are going to listen." She said, "Okay, too fast. The way you agree when you're not really agreeing." She thought this would blow over like everything else. I hung up without saying, "I love you." I sat in the dark with the phone going black in my hand, and I understood something that hurt worse than the hospital. She wasn't sorry. She didn't think she had done anything wrong. 3 weeks of silence didn't mean shame. It meant she hadn't thought about it until she needed me. I had spent those 3 weeks imagining her working up the nerve to apologize. Instead, she called me like I was a babysitting service. Cheryl was the power, I was the backup, and she didn't even see the problem with that. I picked up Arno that Monday morning and he was barely 7 pounds, and he smelled like baby lotion and laundry detergent, and his little hand reached up and grabbed my finger and didn't let go. I had him 10 days, fed him every 3 hours, rocked him, sang the songs I used to sing to Tamara, walked the floors at 2 in the morning when he wouldn't settle. Tamara came by to drop off diapers and pick him up in the evenings, and she talked about his feeding schedule and how tired she was from work, but she never once brought up what she said. When Cheryl came back from the cruise, I called Tamara and told her I wanted to have dinner, just the 2 of us. She said, "Can Reggie come?" I said no. This was between mother and daughter. Thursday, I sat in a back booth and waited. She came in 10 minutes late, that tired new mother look that sits under the eyes and doesn't go away with sleep. When the menus were gone, I said, "I need you to tell me what I did wrong." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I need to know what I did as your mother that made you think Cheryl was better, because I have gone over it 1,000 times and I cannot figure it out. Tell me." She wouldn't look at me. She picked at the corner of her napkin. She said, "You're making this bigger than it is." The same line. I said, "You told me another woman was a better mother than me. How much bigger can it get?" Her eyes filled. She said, "It's not that you were bad. Cheryl makes things easy. She doesn't have to work 2 jobs. At her house, I don't worry about anything." I sat there and felt hit in the chest with something wide and flat, because what she was really saying was that comfort is love. The woman who can make you feel relaxed is the one who loves you more. I said, "You didn't worry at my house because I made sure of it. I did it while exhausted." She wiped tears with the back of her hand and said, "I know you sacrificed, but I don't want Arno to grow up the way I did. I want him to have what I didn't have." She said it through tears like she thought it would sound gentle. It made it worse. She watched me break my body and drain my savings, and instead of thinking my mom gave me everything, she thought I don't want my kid to live like that. I sat back. The restaurant noise went underwater. I said, so everything I gave you wasn't enough. You want to make sure your son never has to live the way I raised you, she whispered. That's not what I'm saying. I said, that is exactly what you're saying. She cried. The food came and neither of us touched it. The plates sat between us getting cold. I asked for the check. My hands shook signing the receipt. She saw them and looked away. She didn't offer to pay. In the parking lot, she said, Mom and I said go home to your baby tomorrow. I drove 6 blocks and called my friend Awaif. I told her everything Tamara said at the table. Awaif didn't sugarcoat it. She said, your daughter just told you to your face that your life wasn't good enough for her baby. That's not about Cheryl having more money. That's your daughter being ashamed of where she came from. I wanted to argue. I couldn't. Then Awaif said something that changed everything. She said, stop trying to convince Tamara you were a good mother. Start showing your grandson who you are. Let the boy decide for himself. I pulled over to sit with that. Something inside me clicked open. I was done waiting for an apology. I was done building a case. I was just going to be in his life, on my terms. I called Tamara once a week and kept it short. I asked for Sundays and did not negotiate. She said Cheryl usually had him Saturdays. I said then I'll take Sundays. She said fine, like she was doing me a favor. The first Sunday, I picked up the diaper bag and taped to the front pocket was a printed sheet, a full schedule, feeding times to the half hour, nap windows, approved foods. At the bottom in italics, Arno prefers the organic formula, not the store brand. I looked at Tamara leaning against the counter with her arms crossed, like this was perfectly normal. I said, did Cheryl write me a manual for watching my own grandson? She did the one shoulder shrug. She said she's just trying to help Mom. I folded the paper in half and handed it back. I said I raised you. I think I can handle a Sunday. The second Sunday, Reggie answered the door, hands in his pockets, the look of a man given a job he did not want. He said, hey, my mom wanted to know if you could bring Arno to her house by 4 instead of bringing him back here. She wants to do his bath routine. I said your mother gets him 6 days a week. I get Sundays. Arno will be home by the time I agreed, not by Cheryl's schedule. He put his hands up. I said pass that message back. Sunday is mine. The third Sunday, Tamara opened the door and said quick and low, just so you know, Cheryl's here. I walked in and there she was on the couch with Arno in her arms, hair done, a cup of something on the coffee table. She smiled the warm smile. She said good morning. I thought I'd stop by since I haven't seen him since yesterday. She still didn't hand him over. She adjusted him on her lap, smoothed his blanket like she was planning to stay. I walked over and stood right in front of her and put my hands out. Didn't ask again, didn't explain. Something passed across her face she covered fast, and she lifted Arno toward me. I settled him against my shoulder. Then she turned to Tamara at the counter and said, make sure she has the right formula. Like I wasn't standing right there. I picked up the diaper bag and left. We had the best day. I read to him from a thrift store book with wrinkly pages. I played the songs I used to play for Tamara. I pushed him in a secondhand stroller around the block, slow and easy, just me and him and the sunshine. He fell asleep with his mouth open and one fist curled up by his ear. I stood on the sidewalk and thought, this is enough. I don't need a nursery with his name on the wall. I just need this. When I brought him back, Tamara looked him over like she was checking a package for damage. She said what happened to the outfit. I said he spit up, so I changed him into one I bought. A little onesie, blue with a bear. She said Cheryl bought him those clothes. I said and I bought him these. He's clean, fed, and happy. That's what matters. She took him inside and closed the door. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, this is Cheryl. I appreciate you spending time with Arno. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about his care. Would you be open to meeting so we can go over a few things? I read it 4 times. Every word polite. Every line a power play. I appreciate you spending time with Arno, like she was thanking a volunteer. The same page, like there was a page and she wrote it. I called Aweef. She said she's not asking you to meet. She's asking you to submit. Don't you dare go to that woman's house and let her interview you. I sat with it. There was a third option. I could walk into that house calm and let Cheryl show Tamara exactly who she was. I told Tamara I was meeting Cheryl on Saturday and I wanted her there. She said, Mom, please don't start anything. I said I'm not starting anything. I'm finishing something. Saturday I parked on Cheryl's street and looked at the 4-bedroom house with the matching curtains. The front door was open behind the screen, like she wanted me to see inside before I knocked. And I saw it. The room to the left, door wide open, a nursery, white crib, rocking chair with a cushion, a mobile with stars and moons, and on the wall above the crib, in wooden letters painted blue and spaced perfectly even, my grandson's name, Arno, spelled out in Cheryl's house like he lived there, like this was his home and she was his mother and everything was already decided. I stood in that doorway and stared at those letters a long time. I walked into the living room, Cheryl on the couch, legs crossed, posture perfect, 2 cups of tea already poured, a plate of cookies, Tamara in an armchair with Arno bouncing on her knee, looking at the floor, Reggie by the doorway off the hall, arms folded, the face of a man who would rather be anywhere else. Cheryl smiled and said, I've put together a little overview of his routine. She slid a packet across the coffee table, 4 pages, typed neat. Page 1, feeding schedule by the hour, which formula, bottle temperature. Page 2, nap windows with a chart that looked like something from a doctor's office. Page 3 was where my hand stopped. At the top, a section called approved visitors and caregivers. Cheryl's name on page 1 under primary caregiver. Mine on page 3 under extended family. The section where you put a cousin who visits twice a year. I held it up so Tamara could see. I said, Tamara, I am on page 3 of a document about my own grandson. I am listed under extended family. I am his grandmother. I said it calm. Cheryl jumped in smooth. She said, no one is saying you're not. We just want Arno to have consistency. Children thrive on routine. That helpful voice that made everything she said sound like common sense. I looked at her sitting there with her tea and her packet and her nursery down the hall, and I said I had a routine with my daughter too. I worked from 6 in the morning until 11 at night, and I still made sure she was fed, bathed, read to, and loved. You don't need 4 pages to be consistent. You just need to show up. The room went quiet. Cheryl's smile got tighter, smaller. Then she turned her whole body toward Tamara and softened her voice and said, sweetheart, I don't want to overstep, but I've noticed Arno is a little unsettled unsettled when he comes back on Sunday evenings. Maybe we should limit the visits to every other week, just until he adjusts. She was trying to cut my one day in half by pretending it was about the baby being fussy. And what broke me worse than the hospital was Tamara's face. She was considering it. Her eyes moved to the side. She tilted her head. My daughter was one knot away from cutting me down to twice a month. I stood up. I didn't plan to. I said, Tamara, look at me. She looked up like she was 12 years old again. I said, I changed your diapers. I stayed up with you when you had croup, and I held you in the bathroom with the shower running hot because the steam was the only thing that helped. I missed my own mother's last Thanksgiving working overtime so you could have Christmas presents. I have never once asked you to choose me, but I am asking you right now to stop letting this woman erase me. My voice cracked on the last word. Then from the doorway, quiet, Reggie said, Mom, maybe this is getting out of hand. He was talking to Cheryl. Her face tightened all at once. The warmth was gone. She said, Reggie, I'm trying to do what's best for everyone. He said, I think we should take a step back. The first time anyone in that family had pushed back on her. She stood, smoothed her pants, picked up her teacup. She said, fine, I've obviously overstepped. I just thought someone should be organized about this. She walked into the back hall and set the teacup down harder than she needed to. I set the packet on the coffee table where it could sit and remind them what Cheryl thought my place was. I touched Arnold's head and walked out. 2 days later, Tamara called, her voice tight and careful. She said Cheryl was really upset. She feels like you disrespected her in her own home. I said, Tamara, that woman made a 4-page document that put me on the same level as a family friend. I didn't embarrass her. I told the truth. Quiet. Then she said, Mom, Cheryl offered to pay for Arnold's daycare. She offered to help with our rent. The price of my daughter had just gone up. 2 weeks passed. Then one Sunday, Tamara opened the door with swollen red eyes and said, Mom, I need to talk to you before you take him. She walked to the couch and sat down and stared at her hands. Then she said Cheryl rewrote her will. I waited. She said Cheryl called her and Reggie over 2 days ago and told them she had met with her lawyer. She presented it like estate planning. Like every family does this. But the new will tied Reggie's inheritance, the house, the savings, everything, to one condition. Cheryl having what she called primary access to Arno. Tamara's voice broke, and she said Cheryl looked right at them and said, I want to make sure my resources go to the people who include me in their family. She said basically, if we don't let her be the main grandmother, Reggie gets nothing. I sat down across from her. I said, so she's buying him. She's buying you. Tamara crumbled. She said I didn't see it. I thought she was just being nice. The dinners, the nails, the stroller, the nursery, all of it. All of it was a deposit. I thought I would feel angry or satisfied. That dark kind. I just felt sad. My daughter got played by a woman who smiled and spent money and made it look like love, and Tamara fell for it because she wanted it to be real. I said Tamara, she was being nice. But nice with conditions isn't love, it's a contract. She looked at me and something shifted behind her eyes. A wall coming down brick by brick. She said I told her she was a better mom than you. I said that to your face. I nodded. She said she had a paid-off house and a pension and free time. You had 2 jobs and no sleep. And I thought that meant she loved me more. She took a shaky breath. Then she said, but she was just spending money. You were spending yourself. Those words went through me like something warm, but I didn't break. I had already done my crying. I said, what did Reggie say about the will? She said he was furious. He stood up and confronted Cheryl right there in her living room. Said threatening to take away his inheritance over babysitting schedules was control, not respect. Cheryl doubled down. Said, I built this family's foundation and I deserve to be respected. After they left, she called Tamara directly. Went around her own son. Said, your mother has poisoned this family against me. I hope you're happy. She blamed me. I wasn't even there. Of course she did. Everything was fine when I was on page 3. The minute I pushed back, I became the problem. I said, what do you want to do? Tamara pressed her hands flat on her knees and looked at me and said, I want my mom back. I let those 4 words fill the empty spaces. I said, I never left, Tamara. You just stopped looking. She broke completely. Sobbed forward on the couch. The sounds of a little girl who finally realized what she had done. She lifted her face and said, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I looked at everything Cheryl had and I thought that was what Arnold needed. But he needs you. He needs to know where he comes from. He needs to know what it looks like when someone gives everything they have. Reggie came down the hall holding Arno. He sat next to Tamara and looked at me and said I should have said something sooner. My mom has always been like this. She did the same thing to my dad before he passed. She controlled everything with money and made it look like love. I'm sorry I let it go this far. I believed him. He shifted Arno toward me and I took the baby in my arms. His little hand wrapped around my finger and held on. I said I don't need a nursery with his name on the wall. I don't need a 4-page schedule. I don't need to be the primary anything. I just need to be his grandmother. Not on a list. Not on a schedule. Just in his life. Tamara nodded slow. She said, what about Cheryl? I looked at the face I had been looking at for 27 years. I said Cheryl is Reggie's mother. She'll always be part of this family. But she does not get to buy a place at the top and push me to page 3. You set the terms now, Tamara. Not her and not me. You're the mother. So be one. She sat up taller. She nodded. A real one. The kind that means I hear you. I kissed Arno on his forehead. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. I was halfway through the doorway when she said, Mom. I stopped. She was leaning forward. She said that scarf you knitted me. The one I left by the door. I waited. She said I found it in my closet last week. I've been sleeping with it. I went down the steps. The car was cold. I drove home.